You know how some people say tattoos are permanent decisions you shouldn't make lightly? Well, I'm about to tell you exactly why that advice exists. I'm Vanessa, I'm 29, and honestly, I thought I was just trying to save my marriage. Turns out, some decisions have a way of blowing up your entire life in ways you never saw coming. My husband Ryan and I had been together for 5 years total, married for 3 of those, and I genuinely believed we were solid. We had our little apartment, our routines, our Friday night takeout tradition. But there was this one thing that kept coming between us. And looking back, maybe I should have paid more attention to why he was so against it. It started right after our engagement party. I was still high on all that wedding planning energy, thinking about ways we could make our bond even more special. That's when I suggested we get matching tattoos. Something small, meaningful, just for us. Ryan's reaction was immediate and harsh. "That's the stupidest thing ever," he said, not even looking up from his phone. Just like that. "No, let me think about it," or "Why is this important to you?" Just complete dismissal. I told him I wasn't asking for anything crazy, maybe just our initials, intertwined, or our anniversary date. But he shut me down again. "I have nothing against tattoos, I just don't want one," he said, like that settled everything. But here's the thing. It didn't settle anything for me. I kept thinking about it, kept imagining how sweet it would be to have this permanent symbol of our love. So I'd bring it up every few months, hoping maybe he'd warm up to the idea. Each time, his response got more annoyed, more final. "We've talked about this, Vanessa. My answer hasn't changed." The way he'd say my name when he was irritated always made me feel like I was being scolded. What really got to me was how he could be so inflexible about something that clearly mattered to me. I mean, marriage is about compromise, right? About doing things for each other, even if they're not your first choice. But Ryan seemed incapable of even considering it. Every time I brought up the tattoo idea, he'd get this look on his face, like I was asking him to jump off a cliff. It started making me feel like my feelings didn't matter to him at all. Like he could just decide what was important in our relationship, and that was that. The worst part was how he'd dismiss it, not just say no, but act like the entire concept was beneath him. "I don't need a tattoo to prove I love you," he'd say, which completely missed the point. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about sharing an experience, creating something beautiful together. But Ryan couldn't see past his own resistance to understand what I was actually asking for. After a while, I stopped bringing it up directly, but the resentment was definitely building. Here I was, willing to compromise on everything from what neighborhood we lived in to how we spent holidays with his family. But he couldn't even consider one small tattoo for me. When I got transferred to a different department at work, I was honestly ready for a change. The new team seemed more relaxed, more creative. That's where I met Jesse. Jesse Wade was this guy in his early 30s with the most incredible tattoo work I'd ever seen. His whole left arm was this intricate forest scene with animals and symbols that told his life story. During our first team lunch, I found myself asking about his ink, and his face just lit up. He spent 20 minutes explaining each element, what it meant, how he'd chosen the artist. He talked about tattoos the way other people talk about fine art or music, with genuine passion and respect for the craft. Over the next few weeks, Jesse and I ended up eating lunch together pretty regularly. He'd ask about my day, remember details from our previous conversations, and when I mentioned my husband's attitude toward tattoos, Jesse just shook his head sympathetically. "Some people don't understand that body art is about self-expression," he said. "It's not about being rebellious or whatever, it's about marking important moments in your life." Finally, someone who got it. One day, I told Jesse about my matching tattoo idea and Ryan's continued refusal. Jesse listened without interrupting, then said something that hit me like a punch to the gut. A real man wouldn't be scared of something so small, especially if it meant that much to his wife. The way he said it, so matter-of-fact, made me realize that maybe Ryan's refusal wasn't just about not liking tattoos. Maybe it was about not caring enough about me to step outside his comfort zone. Jesse started showing me pictures of couples' tattoos on his phone. Beautiful, artistic pieces that celebrated love and commitment. "Your husband doesn't know what he's missing," he said one afternoon, scrolling through images of matching designs. These couples, they're creating something permanent together. Something that says, this person matters enough for me to change my body for them. Every word felt like validation for what I'd been feeling for months. Here was this guy who understood the romantic significance of what I wanted, while my own husband treated it like a joke. I found myself looking forward to work just to talk to Jesse. He had this way of making me feel heard, understood. When I'd complain about Ryan's stubbornness, Jesse would nod knowingly and say things like, "You deserve someone who celebrates your ideas, not shoots them down." It felt so good to have someone take my side for once. At home, Ryan was still giving me the same brick wall responses about tattoos, but Jesse was opening my eyes to what real support looked like. Ryan started asking questions about my work lunches, why I seemed happier when I came home, who I was spending time with. The irony wasn't lost on me. Suddenly he was interested in my day, but only because he was suspicious. When I mentioned Jesse's name, Ryan got this tight expression. "The guy with all the tattoos?" he asked. Like that explained everything. "I bet he's real supportive of your tattoo idea." The sarcasm in his voice made my blood boil. Even when I was making new friends and feeling good about myself, Ryan found a way to make it negative. That's when I knew I had to do something. I was tired of walking on eggshells around Ryan's hang-ups. Tired of having my dreams dismissed and my friendships questioned. Jesse had shown me what encouragement looked like, and I wasn't about to let Ryan's fear hold me back anymore. The decision was building inside me like pressure in a volcano, and I could feel myself getting ready to explode. When Ryan came home from work that Tuesday complaining about his day, barely asking about mine, I made up my mind. I was done waiting for his permission to do something that would make me happy. "I'm going shopping after work tomorrow," I told him, which wasn't technically a lie. I was shopping for the perfect tattoo design and the courage to finally get one. The next evening, I met Jesse at Iron Canvas, the tattoo shop he'd been raving about. Walking in there felt like entering a different world. Walls covered in artwork, the buzz of machines, people getting beautiful designs permanently etched into their skin. Jesse introduced me to Rico, his tattoo artist, this soft-spoken guy with gentle hands and an incredible portfolio. When I explained what I wanted, something meaningful about strength and independence, Rico's eyes lit up. "I have the perfect thing," he said, pulling out a book of Chinese calligraphy. He showed me two symbols that meant exactly what I was looking for. They were elegant, powerful, everything I wanted to feel about myself. But then Jesse made a suggestion that caught me off guard. "You should add something personal," he said, "something to commemorate this moment of growth." Before I could overthink it, I heard myself saying, "What about initials? JW?" Looking back, I can't fully explain why I suggested it. Maybe it was gratitude for Jesse's support. Maybe it was spite toward Ryan's lack of it. Or maybe it was the way Jesse's face lit up when I said his initials, like he was genuinely touched that I wanted to honor our friendship. "Are you sure?" he asked, but his smile told me he hoped I was. Rico added the small letters beneath the Chinese symbols, and suddenly, my tattoo wasn't just about strength and independence. It was about having someone in my life who actually supported those qualities in me. Jesse held my hand through the entire process, telling me jokes and reminding me to breathe through the pain. He kept saying how proud he was of me, how beautiful the tattoo looked, how this was going to change my life for the better. When it was finished, I stared at my reflection in the shop's mirror. The woman looking back at me had taken control of her own story. She'd stopped waiting for someone else's approval and started living for herself. The drive home felt like floating. I had this secret burning under my sleeve, this proof that I was capable of making my own decisions. When I walked through our front door, Ryan was on the couch watching TV, same as always. "How was shopping?" he asked without looking up. Instead of answering, I rolled up my sleeve and held out my arm. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan stared at my tattoo for what felt like hours. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something I'd never seen before, genuine shock. "What the hell is that?" he finally managed. I explained the Chinese symbols, their meaning, how beautiful I thought they were. But his eyes kept drifting to the small letters underneath. What are those initials, Vanessa? My heart was pounding, but I wasn't about to apologize. They're Jesse's initials, I said, meeting his stare. He supported me through this. He was there when you refused to be. Ryan's mouth actually dropped open. I could see him trying to process what I just told him, like his brain couldn't compute that his wife had permanently marked her body with another man's initials. You tattooed another man's name on your body? His voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow that made it more frightening than if he'd screamed. I tried to explain about friendship, about support, about how Jesse had encouraged me when Ryan had torn me down. But he just kept staring at my arm like it was evidence of some crime he couldn't believe I'd committed. That's when Ryan said the thing that changed everything between us. Having another man's initials tattooed on your body is disrespectful to me, and you need to get them removed. Just like that. An order, not a request. After months of refusing to even discuss getting a tattoo together, now he wanted to control what I did with my body? The hypocrisy was staggering. You told me I could get a tattoo, I shot back. You just said you wouldn't get one with me. Well, I found someone who would share the experience. Ryan's jaw tightened, but I wasn't finished. You refused to be part of something that mattered to me, so I found someone who wasn't scared of commitment. The words felt good coming out, like I was finally standing up for myself after months of being dismissed. This isn't about commitment, Ryan said, his voice getting louder. This is about you getting another man's name permanently marked on your body. How do you not see how messed up that is? But all I could hear was more control, more telling me what I should and shouldn't feel. He'd had his chance to be part of this journey, and he'd chosen to reject it. Now he wanted to dictate the aftermath? The next few days were hell. Ryan would catch me looking at my tattoo in the mirror and shake his head in disgust. Every conversation somehow circled back to Jesse, to the initials, to how I'd betrayed our marriage. He started asking pointed questions about my work lunches, about how long I'd been planning this behind his back. The paranoia was exhausting. Finally, Ryan asked the question I'd been dreading. Are you sleeping with him? The accusation hung in the air between us like poison gas. I stared at him. This man who was supposed to trust me, love me, support me, and all I could see was jealousy and suspicion. After everything I'd tried to explain about friendship and support and feeling valued, he'd reduced it to sex. At least he's a man, I said, the words coming out harder than I'd intended. But I meant them. At least Jesse had the courage to support someone he cared about. At least he wasn't scared of a little ink or stepping outside his comfort zone. At least he made me feel like my dreams mattered. Ryan's face went completely stone cold, and I knew I'd crossed some invisible line. But honestly, I was tired of tiptoeing around his fragile ego. 2 weeks later, Ryan filed for divorce. No big dramatic fight, no screaming match, no ultimatum. He just went quiet and businesslike, communicating through lawyers and short formal texts about dividing our stuff. Part of me kept waiting for him to cool down, to realize he was throwing away 5 years over something that should have brought us closer together. But Ryan had made his choice, and apparently, it didn't include me. The divorce process was surreal. We'd sit in mediator meetings like strangers, splitting up our shared life with the emotional investment of people dividing office supplies. Ryan never looked directly at me, never acknowledged the history we'd built together. It was like I'd become a problem to be solved, rather than the woman he'd promised to love forever. The day our divorce was finalized, I was sitting in my new studio apartment, the only place I could afford on my single income, when my phone rang. Ryan's name on the caller ID made my heart skip, thinking maybe he'd finally come to his senses. Hello? I answered, trying to keep the hope out of my voice. I finally got a tattoo, he said without any greeting. For a split second, I felt this rush of vindication. Finally, he understood what I'd been trying to tell him about self-expression and taking control of your story. Really? What did you get? I asked, genuinely curious. The date of our divorce? He said, his voice steady and cold. You know, to symbolize strength and independence. The line went quiet except for the sound of my heart breaking all over again. Before I could respond, before I could process what he'd just told me, he hung up. I sat there holding the phone, staring at my tattoo, And for the first time since this whole thing started, reality hit me like a freight train. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to apologize or admit he'd been wrong. He'd moved on completely and was using my own words, my own reasons, to mock everything I thought our marriage had meant. 6 months after the divorce was final, I found out through a mutual friend that Ryan had started seeing someone new. They'd met at his gym, and according to Sarah, they looked really happy together. The woman was athletic, outdoorsy, the kind of person who probably never pressured anyone to get matching tattoos. When I asked Sarah for more details, trying to sound casual, she just gave me this pitying look and changed the subject. Around the same time, Jesse's situation imploded. Turns out he'd been married the entire time we'd been having our deep lunch conversations. His wife discovered our text messages, innocent as they were, and made it very clear that our friendship needed to end immediately. She even called my work to make sure I understood that any contact with her husband would result in problems for everyone involved. Suddenly, I was alone with my choices. Divorced, living in a cramped studio apartment with another man's initials permanently etched into my skin, and no relationship with that man to show for it. The Chinese symbols that were supposed to represent strength and independence just felt like a daily reminder of how spectacularly I'd misread every situation. My family tried to be supportive, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. My mom would glance at my tattoo and sigh, like she was looking at evidence of my poor decision-making. My sister asked pointed questions about what I was thinking and whether I'd considered how Ryan might feel. Even my coworkers seemed to view me differently, like I'd become the office cautionary tale about workplace friendships gone wrong. The worst part was the loneliness. I'd convinced myself that getting the tattoo was about independence and self-expression. But sitting alone in my studio apartment on Friday nights, I realized it had really been about trying to force someone to love me the way I wanted to be loved. And when that didn't work, I'd looked for validation from someone who was never really available to give it. But here's what I learned, and what nobody wants to admit. Sometimes you make a choice that feels right in the moment, and it ends up changing your entire life in ways you never anticipated. Sometimes standing up for yourself means losing everything you thought you wanted. And sometimes the person you're trying to prove something to isn't even paying attention anymore. I still have the tattoo. The Chinese symbols have faded slightly, but Jesse's initials are as dark as ever. I've thought about getting them covered up or removed, but honestly, they've become part of my story now. A permanent reminder that some decisions can't be undone, no matter how much you might want to take them back. Ryan got his fresh start, his new relationship, his life without the woman who couldn't respect his boundaries. Jesse went back to his marriage, probably with new rules about workplace friendships. And me? I got exactly what I said I wanted: strength and independence. Just not in the way I'd imagined. People ask me if I regret it, if I do things differently, knowing how it all turned out. The honest answer is complicated. I regret how it hurt Ryan, how it ended our marriage, how it isolated me from people I cared about. But I can't bring myself to regret finally doing something for myself, even if it was the wrong thing. Even if it cost me everything I thought I wanted. Sometimes when I'm getting dressed in the morning, I catch sight of those initials in the mirror and remember what it felt like to have someone encourage my dreams instead of dismissing them. Then I remember that person was never really mine to begin with, and the encouragement came with strings I didn't see until it was too late. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Not about tattoos or marriages or workplace friendships, but about the difference between support and manipulation, between standing up for yourself and burning down your life to prove a point. Maybe some strength comes from accepting when you've made a mistake and figuring out how to live with the consequences. Or maybe sometimes you just have to tattoo another man's initials on your arm to learn that permanent decisions require more thought than temporary feelings. Either way, I'm still here, still learning, still trying to figure out what strength and independence actually look like when you're starting over at 29, with nothing but a studio apartment and a tattoo that tells a story you wish you could rewrite.